What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Wednesday, October 10th, 2018, middle of the weekday, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. There's an awful lot going on here. And we have a guest in our third hour, Jason Eastman. He's just started up a new company, Armor Combat Systems. He's one of our newest advertisers. And I asked him to come on the show because what he is selling is an item, or items, plural, about which I get a lot of emails. So I thought we'd have him on the show to talk about that. Obviously, the big story right now is Hurricane Michael. It's made landfall on Florida's Gulf Coast near Mexico Beach. It's a very strong Cat 4, almost Cat 5. It is the biggest storm to hit the United States in 50 years. It's the strongest storm on record to ever hit the Panhandle, and it is just causing all kinds of misery out there. It's moving northeast right now at about 15 miles an hour, and it's the center of the storm is going to continue right on up into Georgia and the Carolinas, like they needed another storm this soon, and into Virginia. In fact, right now, the eye of the storm is forecast to pass right over Norfolk, Virginia. And I can imagine right now they're scrambling to get all those ships out of that harbor and as far out to sea as they can to prevent damage. That's what they did here in Pearl Harbor when we were looking at our hurricanes. They just got them out there. So it's nasty, and I feel bad for all those people having to go through that. I've been through a couple of hurricanes myself, not quite that bad, but it's definitely nasty. Anyway, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. That's 800-313-9443. Michael is in our control room. We have too many Michaels. I'm a Michael. He's a Michael. The hurricane is Michael. I suppose the one bright spot in all of this is when you have a named storm that is historic, they retire the name. Otherwise, they reuse them over and over. And they've used the name Michael for tropical storms in the past, but this will be the last one. So anyway, let's get right on into it. Democrats in Florida are suing to extend Florida voter registration period because of the hurricane, which is, I think, a little cynical. I would presume these people have got a lot more important things to worry about than voter registration. But, you know, the Democrats, they want to just, they're grabbing every advantage that they can. And I think it strikes me as a little cold-hearted. It really, really, really does. Okay. Getting on back to Nikki Haley. A lot of people are curious about the sudden resignation, although the official story is that Trump and Haley were talking about this 6 months ago. But a lot of people are starting to wonder if she was the person who wrote that anonymous op-ed in the New York Times, that insider view about what was going on. And so speculation is just all over the place as to what was really going on, because that's a very nice job. The UN ambassador, she was apparently very good at it. At least Israel certainly thought so. The IDF tweeted out a salutation to Nikki Haley for her support for Israel, which prompted a backlash saying she's supposed to be working for the United States and not Israel. Now, Trump has confirmed that Dina Powell is under consideration to substitute Haley as the United Nations envoy. And again, he repeated the comment that his daughter Ivanka would be a great choice as well, but he would be accused of nepotism. Maybe, but Trump wasn't worried about nepotism when he brought Jared Kushner on board. And frankly, I would take Ivanka over Dina, given Dina's many links to the Clintons. So I wouldn't rule that out entirely. Now, as Nikki Haley resigns, the corporate media is trying to polish up her image. They're trying to describe her as a moderate. And that provoked a reaction as well. I mean, she was pro-war, pro-imperialist, pro-Israel. basically a sycophant. And so there's a pushback on the media spin. Now, here's an interesting little story that came on out. This is in the Washington Examiner, where Bob Corker came on out and said that he wouldn't rule out replacing Nikki Haley. And then said, we've had no conversations about it. Conjecture's really bad for your health. I don't respond to conjecture. In other words, there's no story there. He hasn't been talked to about this. What he's signaling is he's putting his name out there that he would like the job of UN ambassador. He's trying to get his name on the list. So we'll see what happens along that. Now, Hillary Clinton, of course, is out there in the news, making the rounds, starting a speaking tour with Bill Clinton. And she keeps making these little odd statements because apparently Hillary Clinton described the swearing-in ceremony for Brett Kavanaugh as a political rally to try and sort of undermine the integrity of what was going on. And Trump fired back at Hillary saying she doesn't get it, and that's why she lost. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. More and more people are asking, where is the outrage over Hillary Clinton basically inciting violence with that comment that you cannot be civil with a political party that wants to destroy everything that you believe in? I mean, we're living in a time where Republicans are being shot, stabbed, doxxed, beaten, mailed powder, run out of restaurants, sent death threats. And Hillary's out there saying it's time to be even more uncivil. She's hardly known. We were getting that stuff from Maxine Waters and Loretta Lynch and a bunch of other people. And again, Hillary's saying if the Democrats win back the Congress, then they'll be nice and polite. There's an implied threat there. If they don't get what they want, it's going to be more violent out there. Tucker Carlson responded saying, so you're not required to be civil to people you disagree with? Do you want to live in that country? I went through 8 years of Obama. I know what it's like to be frustrated, but I was always civil. So good for Tucker Carlson, and he's right. If we abandon civility, if we have two opposed political groups who are descending into fanaticism and willing to resort to violence, we're in serious trouble here. Although so far, thank goodness, there's been very little violence on the GOP conservative side here. Hillary is still trying to defend the double standard that was on display between her attacks both on Trump and on Kavanaugh over these baseless allegations of sexual assault. Remember during the 2016 campaign, there were a bunch of women who came forward who said, oh yes, Trump groped me, Trump fondled me in an elevator. He did all these horrible things. He made me do the antler dance. And it was all carried as if it was true without any corroboration. And so Hillary was questioned, why is it different for Bill Clinton? And she said, well, his allegations are different. I mean, they were investigated, which is not true. There's never been an investigation into Juanita Broderick's accusation of rape here. The only difference that I can see between Kavanaugh and Bill Clinton is that Monica Lewinsky did come up with proof. That blue dress. That seems to be about it here. Now, a little bit of good news. Hillary Clinton is back in court again over the emails. And Judicial Watch has announced a federal court has ordered a hearing for Thursday, this coming Thursday, as a matter of fact, tomorrow, on a motion to compel testimony about the email practices of former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. And the order was issued by U.S. District Court Judge Emmett G. Sullivan, who so far seems to be one of the good guys. I'd like to see him on the Supreme Court. So this came out of a Judicial Watch Freedom of Information Act lawsuit about the controversial employment status of Huma Abedin, who was the former Deputy Chief of Staff to Clinton. The lawsuit, which also seeks records regarding the authorization of Abedin to engage in outside employment while employed by the Department of State, was reopened because of revelations about the Clinton email system found in another lawsuit, Judicial Watch versus U.S. Department of State. So in 2016, Hillary Clinton was required to submit under oath written answers to Judicial Watch's questions. Clinton objected to and refused to answer questions about how the email system was created, and the basis for her claim that the State Department had 90 to 95% of her emails. And Judge Sullivan is looking at that situation again. Now, here's a development just happening today behind all the sturm and drang about Hurricane Michael, which deserves a lot of attention for those poor people. But we're still being conscientized about a lot that's going on in the world. And apparently, earlier today, FBI Director Christopher Wray was testifying to the U.S. Senate about domestic spying and government abuse of data. And Senator Rand Paul asked Director Wray if President Trump's conversations are, present tense, getting collected in the FISA database. Director Wray refused to answer, which I think signals, yes, they're spying on the president. The FBI is definitely spying on the president. Okay, a little bit of good news from our Supreme Court. Basically, they ruled that North Dakota can keep their voter ID law in force. And, of course, the liberal justices just went ballistic. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, this will lead to disenfranchisement. If you ask to see ID, this is going to disenfranchise voters. Technically, yeah, it's going to disenfranchise the voters who should not be voting. And then Eleanor Kagan came on out and said, really, 1 month, 4 weeks, a little less than 4, it's way too short a time for them to go back to the old system. And North Dakota election officials are saying, no, we're good to go right now here. And the issue here is they're saying there's a lack of qualifying identification. Well, all it takes is a driver's license or a state-issued ID. And if you want to relax, things a little bit more, the issue here is that illegal immigrants should not be allowed to vote. And the Democrats are just depending on the flood of illegal immigrants to swing Congress back into their control. And they're openly talking about, oh yeah, let's let the illegal immigrants come on in. Let's let them vote. What's going to happen? They're bread and circuses time. The illegal immigrants who have no real love for this country are going to vote themselves milk and honey at your expense. So I'm glad the Supreme Court upheld it, and it's going to be a fight. We need a nationwide voter ID law. If your life is so messed up that you cannot get an identification card that documents you are a U.S. citizen, probably you shouldn't be voting anyway. Let's be brutally frank about it. You don't have the brain cells for it. I mean, it's absurd. You need an ID to buy alcohol. You need an ID to buy tobacco. You need an ID to drive a car. But you're not supposed to have an ID to vote? It doesn't make any sense. Everybody's got IDs. Voting is a right reserved to the citizens of the United States of America, and the Democrats are trying to give it away. Here, we'll give you the right. It's not a right to vote. We'll let you vote, and we'll give you all kinds of free stuff. Vote for us. Yeah, it's estimated 90% of the illegal immigrants who vote will vote Democratic. And there are something like 20 million illegal immigrants in this country right now. It's an absolute epic disaster here. Okay, so let's talk about the war zones. Apparently over in Syria, the Kurdish People's Protection Units, otherwise known as the YPG, carried out a new attack on Turkish-backed forces in the region of Afrin. And according to the YPG, 4 members of the Turkish-backed groups were killed in the village of Mariam. Now, this was the first YPG attack in Afrin, and apparently last month the group carried out about 20 attacks. So there's actually been a decrease in YPG military activity in the region of Afrin, and it seems to be linked to additional security measures employed by the Turkish armed forces and their proxies. Now remember, when this is all over, Afrin is going to become a point of contention, because when Turkey moved into it, they were saying, we're just there to deal with the Kurdish terrorists, and we'll leave when we're done. And now they're showing indications that they might want to just sort of hang on to it, which Syria is not going to be happy about. Let's take a phone call here from Lou in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, guten Abend.
Guten Abend. Wie geht's es Ihnen?
I don't know if you remember me, but I've been gone for a while because of a couple of reasons, being that, well, for one thing, my old computer went kaput on me, and I just got a new one finally recently, and I also had a brain tumor and brain surgery and stuff, so I've been away from all that for over a year.
Oh, please feel better.
Yeah. No, I'm doing pretty well, thank God, and stuff. I haven't been to work since January, but I'm preparing to return next week to work, you know. I just kind of missed the show and stuff all that time, you know. So how's everything going with you?
Well, you know, everything's going okay. You know, we're still doing what we're doing here. Claire's slowly but surely getting better, and I probably ought to mention right now that I'm only going to do the first 2 hours of tomorrow's show because I have to take her for an MRI on her back, and I need to email the board op to have a best of tape ready to go for hour number 3. So, and after that, we're going to decide she may have to have surgery. The big issue right now that we're worried about, of course, is, you know, we have Medicare, we have a supplemental from AARP, but we've been told that there will be a copay over and above what the insurance covers for both the MRI and the potential surgery, and we have no idea what that's going to be.
Well, okay, well, hopefully everything goes well with Claire and stuff, and, you know, many prayers for you guys. And
Thank you.
Basically the reason I'm calling is because I want to, I don't know if you noticed that over here in California, for the elections, for the U.S. Senate, we've got two Democrats running, and no Republicans. Same for Lieutenant Governor, you know, 2 Democrats. I mean, 2 donkeys and no Republicans, you know.
Yep.
And I just can't believe that is happening and stuff. They said that there's a law, you know, saying that, you know, the winner, you know, that's the way how it is and stuff. Do you guys in Hawaii ever have to face 2 candidates from the same party for office and stuff?
Occasionally, yes. There's no law that says there has to be one of each party, and apparently the, you know, I mean, California is firmly Democrat, and apparently the GOP wasn't able to field a candidate, or maybe they just thought their money was better spent elsewhere.
Yeah, because it's really a shame. It's really ridiculous and stuff. You know that, you know, for the U.S. Senate we have that kind of a choice and stuff, Lieutenant Governor and everything, you know. But I don't know. Hopefully, I don't know. Then not too many other states have to deal with that and stuff, you know, because it's really ridiculous and it's really a travesty, you know. Democrats, donkeys here in California, they rule the state, but they've made it dysfunctional. They've been in power for too long.
Oh, everywhere the Democrats have been in control, it's just become a disaster. Look at Baltimore is a good example.
Yeah, Baltimore, and I don't know what other cities and stuff, but up and down the state. And then also, I think it was Proposition 9 about the division of the state, that they said that the state Supreme Court, you know, that they said it, you know, wasn't going to, you know, couldn't vote on it and stuff, you know. How interesting, you know. I mean, I missed all that. Well, I was out of, you know, without a computer and stuff, and I never heard it mentioned, because I was watching, you know, for news, I was watching BBC and DWP News.
All right, well, Lou, I'm sorry to do this. I'm going to have to cut you off here because we have to take a break for commercials.
That's okay, Mike. I'll call you later then.
All right, yeah, call back later and, you know, get well. We'll be right back after these few words.
corporate media dominates the American opinion. Finding independent voices that counter this avalanche is becoming increasingly difficult. With the endless corruption running rampant throughout our government, independent voices are needed more than ever to battle the offensive against our freedoms and liberties. As a listener of RBN, no one understands this concept better than you. Now it's up to you to do your part. The time has come for you to take action and begin broadcasting the truth to hundreds or thousands of people every month. Sound impossible? Quite the contrary. With pointed slogans from LibertyStickers.com, you can reach countless sleeping Americans unaware that they live in a real-life wonderland. LibertyStickers.com has a huge inventory of political bumper stickers and messages that reflect the truth about our government, our politicians, and the future of America. With so many in stock, there's one perfect for you. Visit us today at LibertyStickers.com. Again, that's LibertyStickers.com. Do your part. Your voice is important. Let it be heard.
Attention RBN listeners. Dr. Ignatius Piazza, founder of Front Sight Firearms Training, and fate have come together to allow RBN to run another fundraiser till the end of the year. We didn't really expect this opportunity, but thankfully it's here and running as you hear this. We've set a goal of 500 donations by the end of the year, which averages around 6 per day, 7 days a week. When you realize all the folks listening to RBN all hours of the day and night, we think our goal is realistic and extremely critical to keep RBN on the air. If everybody listening will seriously assess their ability with firearms and then take advantage of this opportunity, we feel our goal is very conservative. Please take the time to look over Front Sight's website to get an idea of an amazing facility and the world-class training that's going on there. If this interests you, you likely will have like-minded friends that would like to know. Tell them. If for some reason some listeners are not personally interested, consider sons and daughters, close friends, nieces or nephews, top valued employees, inform club members, share the opportunity with police and fire departments. It's not too early to plan Christmas presents for special people. This fundraiser has come at an extremely critical time for RBN because the dire need for equipment upgrades. We're running on the spare tire currently with no money to fix a flat, and the fuel gauge is bouncing on E. This is one of the most valuable ways you can help RBN financially because you get Commander lifetime membership value that is 50 times your donation and can be passed on forever. How many times during life do you get to leave a legacy? See more details and contact info on our webpage, republicbroadcasting.org, and thank you.
What this country is coming to, I sure would like to know. If they don't do something by and by, the rich will live and the poor will die. Doggone, I mean the panic is on. Can't get no way, can't draw no pay.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking about the various conflict areas around the world here. Israel, in the person of Netanyahu, is saying that Israel will continue serious strikes despite the S-300. And apparently Netanyahu told this to Russia's vice premier just yesterday. Israel must continue to hit hostile targets in neighboring Syria despite Moscow's decision to equip Damascus with advanced air defense missiles. And it may be bluff and it may be bluster, because there are now serious concerns about just how stealthy America's stealth technology is. Now, normally in the past, stealth aircraft have been deployed with other support aircraft for like massive jamming. Remember that F-117 got shot down, was out there operating on its own. They believed it was invisible, and it turned out it wasn't. And there is another issue, and that has to do with the fact that these stealth jets, when they start to turn on their systems, their electronic suppression systems, radio suppression systems, they become visible. And electronic systems on the ground that are listening for those sources of electromagnetic radiation will be able to locate the aircraft and direct missiles to it. Now, there's another story, and this one came out of Sputnik News. Again, there's doubts about just how well this works. Apparently, the Pentagon has ordered additional tests for the F-35 for its stealthiness, meaning it's not so sure about the plane's invisibility to the S-300 missiles. Part of the problem is that the stealth features on the F-35 are based on data that Israel and the United States got from a very early version of the S-300, which they got from Greece all the way back in 1978. And the S-300 systems today are totally different. They've been completely modernized and upgraded. And Russia has definitely put a tremendous amount of effort into defeating the stealth technology. And it's now known that going to lower frequency radars gets past the stealth. Remember, there was this embarrassing situation where the United States, when they were making stink face with North Korea, they flew a bunch of F-22s along just the edge of the DMZ as kind of a message, which I don't know what kind of a message you send with an invisible aircraft. And they got a little notice from China saying that China was able to see the aircraft on the older VHF radars. So we'll see. What if it's a bluff? I mean, we know the defense contractors lie about what they're building. They puff it up. It'll do this, it'll do that. And then you talk to the people actually out there trying to use it, and it's junk. So, anyway, Syria's Assad has taken, I think, a very wise and prudent step. And again, it signals this war is finally running down. Assad has offered a full amnesty to all deserters from the Syrian army. It's a general amnesty, and basically announced it yesterday. And it says it applies to Syrian men both inside and outside the country. There are going to be no punishments for desertion. It's just all written off, and there's 4 months to take advantage of the amnesty. People outside Syria have 6 months, and they're saying this is probably going to bring a lot of Syrian refugees home who basically left Syria after deserting the military or avoiding military service, and now they get to go home. There's no reason for them to not go home. Getting on over to this kerfuffle between Turkey and Saudi Arabia, this story about this so-called missing journalist is getting murkier and murkier. And one story coming out of the Daily Mail is that this Jamal Khashoggi was actually smuggled out of the Saudi Arabian consulate in Istanbul and flown back to Saudi Arabia, where he's being held prisoner. But he's alive. And this is supposedly from a source close to the kingdom's royal family. Now, Al Jazeera is actually backing off the story, saying that they were quoting Reuters, and that the Reuters sourcing for their story were some unnamed Turkish officials. So this may have been fake news. Not sure why they went with it right now, because Saudi Arabia is not going to be happy at the way the U.S. media and the U.S. government went with this. I mean, Donald Trump was talking tough the other day, saying, we demand answers. So somebody might be trying to sabotage U.S.-Saudi relations. And, of course, we know what Middle Eastern nation is always working to remain our only friend in the Middle East. So that may be the origin of that as well. But what it emphasizes is the corporate media has abandoned objectivity and is all about pushing the agenda. Pushing the agenda. Look at Russiagate. They're still pushing that with zero evidence. Russia collusion, Russia collusion, Russia collusion. We'll be right back after these commercials. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, keeping an eye on Hurricane Michael. Down in Israel, 11 Palestinian protesters were wounded by Israeli fire during a protest along Gaza's coast. That happened on Monday. This according to the Gaza Health Ministry. Protesters were marking the 12 years since Israel imposed a blockade on the Gaza Strip, and probably was motivated by Israel's recent reduction in the allowable fishing zone for the Gaza fishermen to operate in. just an arbitrary, you can only go so many miles from the coastline, and it's their coastline. So again, it's just Israel's campaign of trying to dispirit the Palestinians and just crush out their spirit, so they'll give up and go someplace else here. Now, Israel's Minister of Justice, Aiea Shaked, yesterday warned the High Court of accepting any of the 8 petitions currently filed against the controversial Jewish nation-state law. And Shaked warned the High Court of Justice of interfering in the basic law, calling it foolish behavior. It said that any interference by the High Court of Justice would be dangerous, saying in a democracy, the court is not part of the process of writing the Constitution. So apparently there is a tremendous amount of pushback on this nation-state law. It certainly made Israel appear to be an apartheid state all around the world. That was everybody's reaction. Oh, if the Jewish population is here and the non-Jewish population is down here, that's apartheid. That's definitely apartheid here. Over in the West Bank, Jewish settlers have vandalized a dozen private vehicles in the Palestinian village of Kariut, basically slashing the tires, spray painting racist slogans on them. And apparently the settlers are stepping up their attacks on the Palestinian villages, coincident with the harvesting of the olive crops. Now, olive production from an estimated 27 million olive trees represents a primary source of income for over 100,000 Palestinian families in the West Bank. And you know how the settlers like to target those olive trees, because it takes 10 years after you plant an olive tree before you can get a saleable crop. Now, according to Palestinian figures, more than 650,000 Israeli settlers now live on 196 Jewish-only settlements built with the Israel government approval, in addition to more than 200 so-called settler outposts, which are not officially sanctioned by Israel's government, but which are allowed to basically stand there here. Now, as you know, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was recently re-interviewed yet again about these corruption charges that he's looking at. And Israel's finance minister Moshe Kahlon is saying that if Netanyahu is indicted over these corruption allegations, he cannot remain in office. And that, of course, would threaten the current ruling coalition. And Kahlon, who heads the Kulana party, said he would pull out of the coalition if Netanyahu were indicted. So, anyway, we were talking the other day about this new law that Israel has, where if you post to social media posts that support the Palestinian cause or report on Israeli war crimes, that you could go to jail. But there's a very revealing article that came out of immc.org, basically saying that in practice, the law is only being applied to Arab suspects for online incitement to terror cases, never for Jewish suspects. Again, it's an apartheid state. Over in East Jerusalem, a Palestinian was forced to demolish his own home on Monday in the Beit Hanina neighborhood of occupied East Jerusalem. He received the demolition threats from the Jerusalem municipality. And so Ayman Naim Kawasba told the Ma'an news agency that he moved out all of his furniture and other belongings and then proceeded to demolish the home in which he had lived along with his wife and 6 children for a decade. And I can understand why he did that, because normally when Israel comes in to demolish a home, they don't bother with the niceties about furniture and belongings. They just bulldoze everything here. Now, there continues to be a lot of controversy over this Al Jazeera documentary about the Israel lobby in the United States. As you know, they made a documentary about the Israel lobby in Great Britain. It aired in Great Britain. It caused a huge, huge uproar. Israel supporters were screaming anti-Semite, Jew hater, the usual, blah, 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 blah. And a lot of people here in the United States wanted to see the documentary that was made about the Israel lobby in the United States. And bits of it are starting to leak out. and it is a real wake-up call about just how nefarious all of this stuff is. But Al Jazeera has never allowed it to be aired in total. And the question is, why? Who pulled the button on it? And early on, it was suspected that Qatar's ruler, Emir Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, had ordered Al Jazeera not to air it. Al Jazeera is now saying, no, it really didn't come from him. The Emir didn't even contact us. It was just apparently a lot of political pressure brought to bear, threats against its satellite channels. Now, as you know, Israel is trying to claim sovereignty over the Golan. They have occupied it for a long time. They formally annexed it, but no other nation on earth recognized the annexation. And now they're back to talking about it really should be part of Israel. See, this is Israel's idea of peace in the Middle East. We want that peace over there. We want that peace over there. We want that peace over there. Russia is saying no. And what's really interesting is Netanyahu had actually announced Putin understands the territory's importance for Israel, implying that Putin was saying that, yeah, this might be an okay thing. So Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov came on out and said, no, any change of status would violate UN resolutions. All righty. Now, down in South Africa, interesting developments. Now, as you know, South Africa had gone forward with this law that legalized the expropriation of white-owned farmlands to be redistributed to black farmers, following the pattern of Zimbabwe, which ended in disaster. And now we hear the same thing is going on over in Namibia. But in South Africa, the largest ethnic group, the Zulu, are speaking out against this. They think it's a bad idea. And the Zulu nation is saying they're ready to cooperate with the country's white farmers to form a farming partnership. Because as things stand right now, there is inadequate food. And most of these farms are sitting idle because they've already been abandoned by farmers who think they're going to be taken away anyways. So why plant a crop you're never going to harvest? So there's a good ruler right there. That chief of the Zulus, it's a smart guy. Getting on back to weapons and weapon systems and whether they're of good quality or not, the United States Army wants to field a new long-range precision strike munition by the early 2020s. And it's called the Long Range Precision Fires. It's one of the highest priorities for capability modernization. And what they're trying to do is basically have a smart artillery shell, which is not a new idea. Gerald Bull had come up with something like that a while ago. But what they want is an artillery shell with an electronics package that can survive the stress of being fired from an artillery, a piece of artillery, and then actually actively guide itself to the designated target, either with GPS or laser guidance. Not really sure which one they're going to be using. And here's a bizarre story, and this came out of Russia Insider. U.S. Special Forces want America to reverse engineer Russian machine guns. And the reason why they want that is rather bizarre. When the U.S. kicks up a regime change in other countries like Iraq and Syria, they equip the combatants with Russian weapons or copies thereof to sort of maintain that deniability, you know. No, we didn't have nothing to do with it. If we were behind it, they'd have M16s. The problem is that as these weapons break and wear out, they can't find the spare parts. They're having to scrounge through the global arms market trying to buy Russian hardware and spare parts. So the U.S. Special Forces Command, which oversees all of the commando units, says, let's have U.S. companies manufacture Russian and other foreign weapons, copies of them. So we can go on giving these to insurgents in other countries and go on pretending that we have nothing to do with all the bloodshed that's taking place over there. Now, this next story should, I hope, wake some people up about how ill-prepared we are to actually go to war against a military peer like Russia and China. Apparently, the U.S. Government Accountability Office issued a new report basically saying that we have an entire generation of these new smart weapons that are wide open to cyber attacks. And apparently, the GAO sent the Pentagon a warning about this a while back, but apparently only 1 out of 20 vulnerabilities had been fixed since the last test. And it's a grim picture of military security. Apparently, a host of American weapons can easily be hacked. And that, of course, might explain the humiliation of the USS Donald Cook. Now, for those of you who don't remember, the USS Donald Cook was an Aegis ship patrolling the Black Sea, and it was approached by a Russian electronic warfare aircraft, just one. And this electronic warfare made 12 passes over the USS Donald Cook, and on every pass, all the systems on the Donald Cook shut down. The radars wouldn't work, missile guidance wouldn't work. Apparently, reportedly, freaked out the crew, who had been basically brainwashed with what's called Aegis arrogance. We can go anywhere, we can do anything. And the Russians just got done saying, no, you can't. The Russians have put a lot of investment into electronic warfare, and it's apparently gone beyond simple jamming. If they can actually get into those computers. And there was one part of this GAO report where a penetration study was run on some of the major Defense Department computers which are involved in managing battles. And they were able to get in and literally reboot the entire computer system. So can you imagine Donald Trump saying, yes, let's go to war with Russia, and all of a sudden all the computers on all the U.S. weapons shut down? A little bit of an embarrassment there. All right, let's talk. We actually have a caller on the line. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
It's negative little me, Mike. Yeah, Mike, the phone call you had yesterday from a gentleman, he said that was negative. He's not going to call back in 6 months. Now, why would you not call back and wait 6 months? There's a lot of stuff going on just because of me being negative. I think it was about the economy because I'm very negative on it, obviously, because if you look today, it was down 700,
Okay, I mean, you're not the only person who's negative on the economy. I'm negative on the economy. A lot of experts are saying there is a major correction coming. It may have even started today. The Dow dropped 800 points. That's over 3%. And I'm waiting to see what the futures are going to be for tomorrow morning, whether there's going to be the start of a panic. And no doubt the plunge protection team is already rushing over there with a whole bunch of cash to try and prop it up just one more time, but they can't keep that up forever.
Yeah, Mike, a caller from British Columbia, he didn't have ask his other question yesterday about mortgage-backed securities. Hopefully he'll call back today and talk about that. But, Mike, you had a couple callers yesterday talking about one with the robotics. He just didn't understand. Yeah, if somebody is working 40 hours and they get dropped to 20 with the same pay because of a robot taking over, that's 20 hours less of you making money. You won't consume. You can't consume if you got 20 hours less work. I don't understand.
If you go from 40 hours to 20 hours, your boss isn't going to keep on paying you your full salary. Your pay is going to be cut in half, and that exacerbates the situation. The caller was basically on this idea that increased production is a good thing. Not always. Levels of production have to be determined by demand. And if the demand is not there, which is what we're seeing in the retail markets right now, if the demand isn't there, boosting production is not going to fix things. If anything, it's going to run out the cash reserves of the manufacturers that much faster. They're going to have to pull back because they're not making sales.
And this is a consumption-based world, right? I mean, I think the U.S. is 65 to 70% consumption. So, I mean, you need consumption for the gears to keep turning. If consumption stops, the gears stop turning.
Well, Americans have been trying to pull back from consumption, but a lot of what drives that is this planned obsolescence, this corporate system, which requires us to buy the same things over and over and over again. High-end cars are only designed to last for 8 years. The low-end cars only for 5 years. Same thing with computers and cell phones. They're not designed to last. They're designed to basically fail, go into a landfill, and you're forced to go on out and buy the same thing over and over again. So it's not by choice that Americans are over-consuming. That's just what the marketplace has offered up to them.
And Mike, how was it back in the olden days when they built the radio? It lasted for a real long time, but yet those companies were still able to stay in business. How is that possible?
Well, the population was growing. There were always new people who were buying radios. Kids left home. They wanted a radio of their own. You're right. The radios lasted forever because if the tube burned out, you just went and bought a new tube. Then you had the transistor revolution, and radios all of a sudden became disposable. They were no longer, you couldn't repair them any longer. Well, really smart nerds could. But yeah, and the same thing, cars back then would last forever if you took care of them. And again, today, they are intentionally designed to wear out and fail to force you to buy another one. Dustin, I'm going to hold you over this commercial break, so don't hang up, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Dustin in New Jersey, and we're talking about the dynamics of the consumer economy. And it all does hook together. And you can't just get on an idea of saying, well, if we increase production, prices will go down. Levels of production are determined not by the efficiency of the factories, although obviously efficiency does lower costs, but by demand. If there's no demand for a particular product, then increasing production accomplishes nothing. In fact, it causes more harm than good.
And Mike, yet another phone caller who was talking about tariffs or a tax, obviously, because we all know that. It's like a VAT tax. But, I mean, it's good for bringing jobs back. But he was bringing up the Civil War and World War II. Those days are gone. This is 2018, man. There's competition out there now.
Yes.
That's one thing people don't understand. China is like 85% of the manufacturing of the world now. That's just a reality. I know people don't want to hear that, but that's a fact. It ain't my fault.
No. Well, once the United States broke free of Great Britain, they launched an industrial boom and went right into competition with Britain. And they did very, very well because there wasn't really anybody else out there to compete against. But it is a different world. And let's just look at the empirical evidence. We're not seeing the factories being rebuilt. We're not seeing the jobs come back to our shores. And it's causing a tremendous amount of hostility with these other countries. The IMF is now saying they're expecting a slowdown in growth for both China and the United States because of this tariff war.
And Mike, I want to just say, Phil, I hope you get better. That's in California, and good luck with your Windows 10 computer that you just got. And Mike, did you hear? Well, there's that Windows 10 problem where they had just released the update where it was removing people's save files folders.
Yes.
Did you hear about that?
Yeah. Well, Windows has already withdrawn that update. And the really annoying part of it is this bug was being reported to them by the insiders who got to pre-test the new cut of Windows 10. They have this group of people that they'll send out a pre-release and they'll get bug reports. And apparently a lot of people had reported this happening, and Microsoft went ahead and released the update without addressing the issue.
I hate to break this to everybody, but Windows 10 is the last operating system we're getting. It's just going to be this from now on. Updates, maybe paid service packs. That's the future, unfortunately. It's going to be patch broken, fixing things, breaking other things. It's going to be like that probably for the rest of the operating system's life, which is indefinite right now. But hey, Mike, did you hear about what Intel was doing with a company called Principal Technologies? They released the new i9 9900K. Well, it wasn't released. It was like it's pre-order now from Intel, but they had sanctioned this review by Principal Technologies, and they reviewed it against AMD's processor, but they gimped AMD's processor to make it look like the Intel was way better than the AMD was. It was very shady. So if you ever can look that up, Intel Principal Technologies controversy.
Okay,
Thanks,
Justin,
Mike.
I got to let you go. We got to take a station identification break. We'll be back with more phone calls in hour number 2 after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. And before we go back to the telephones here, update on Hurricane Michael. It has weakened down to a Category 3. That's good news, but it's still a bad storm. I'm being forwarded emails from people who are living in Tallahassee, which is about an hour away from the eye of the hurricane, and apparently oak trees are literally being uprooted and coming down on top of homes. So this is definitely a bad one. And now, of course, Georgia is getting ready to deal with it as the storm continues to move northeast. All right, let's go back to the phones here. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Mike? Mike, talk about the smart weapons. You know,
Yes.
I say the same. You know, like with cars, when they come with the smart cars, in a way, I'm glad that Tesla is going the way it's going now. I don't want a smart car. I want a stupid car and a smart driver. That's plain and simple, you know?
Oh, I like that. That's a good phrase.
And another thing I want to ask you is kind of like connected. I just got off the phone before with Duke Energy, and they're saying they're putting, without anybody's permission, they're putting smart meters in. And I said, no, I don't want to, you know, you're not going to put it into my house. I said, first of all, this thing is filled with radiation and all that, from what I understand. Second of all, there's other things that, you know, just not good. And then she told me that I didn't even realize that all of North Carolina, anyway, they have electrical meters that are not that somebody come to read the meters that's got radiation in them anyway. I mean, you just can't win. I mean,
well, hold it. First of all, the only radiation involved, is very low power, like a Wi-Fi, because all the smart meter is supposed to do is replace a human meter reader. And it was done for purely economic reasons. And I think somebody tried to fan this up into an internet meme as a distraction from more serious things. Again, it strikes me, it's another one of these distractions like no plane at the Pentagon or other stuff like that. I'm personally completely unconcerned about smart meters.
You don't think there's any danger?
I don't see how there would be any danger. All it does is it's reading how much electricity that you use and sending that information back to the power company. That's all a smart meter does.
What about as far as Wi-Fi? I have Wi-Fi now, but I've been thinking about getting rid of it because I'm concerned about the radiation. And this doesn't just come from me. You know, a lot of this stuff comes from InfoWars. I mean, they talk about it quite a bit.
Well, it's one of the areas in which I don't agree with InfoWars. But always remember the inverse square law. And that is that when you are looking at a source of any electromagnetic radiation, whether it's radio waves or light, every time you double your distance away from it, the amount of energy drops by 4. The energy density is the inverse square of the distance. So when you're far away from the smart meter, which generally you are, it's on the outside of the house, there's going to be very little energy getting to you at all. Same thing with your Wi-Fi in your home. I really do think this is being overblown. And I think it's being overblown, first of all, again, as part of the attempt to make the internet and independent media look kooky and as distractions away from other things like this dangerous rush to war.
Well, that I agree with you. I mean, there's a lot of distractions, but so you don't, as far as the 5G, there's a big thing about 5G now. You don't think that's, I heard you talking about the other day. You don't think there's any real, I'm asking you because I respect you, because I know you know about computers and all this and all these, because you've been on it from like the beginning. You know, I think you said you worked for NASA already.
Yeah.
So that's why I asked you,
Well, 5G is just a faster version of 4G, and I think this whole thing about 5G is dangerous could conceivably be a public relations campaign by the 4G providers to discourage people from switching over, which would cost them revenue. Anytime there's a new technological breakthrough that comes along, the people that are threatened by it, they come up with all kinds of things about, you know, how dangerous it is and you shouldn't go there. When Edison invented the electric light bulb, the coal and gas companies were getting editorials in the newspaper about this unknown, you know, electric thing in your home. It represents a danger. Certainly not the danger that you have from a leaking gas main. Or accumulating carbon monoxide from burning coal. But that's how these things happen. A lot of what you see out there that warns of a danger relative to a product or something is usually from somebody who's either getting ready to sell you a new product or there's a new product out there that threatens their bottom line. And you just need to sort of keep that in mind.
Why do you think people are so concerned about the smart meters then? I mean, what do you think that is?
They've been sold it. They've been sold that idea. It's been poured all over the internet along with the stuff about 5G to get people riled on up. And I've looked very carefully at the smart meters, and I don't see that there's a problem. I think probably, in fact, I'll tell you where the angst over smart meters is probably coming from, are the meter readers who are losing their jobs.
Well, here in North Carolina, supposedly they've already lost their jobs. That lady I talked to said they don't have meter readers. I didn't really pay attention to that since I moved here from Texas about 3 years ago. But she said that they don't have them because the electrical meters they have now. She said which do have radiation also. But so evidently a bunch of meter readers have already lost their jobs here. I'm wondering, I know that you have a few other people from North Carolina to call you. I wonder what they're thinking about this, because this is going to be all over the state.
Okay, well, Mark, before I let you go here, I'd like to ask that you be very careful between using the words radiation and radio energy. And yes, radio energy is technically a form of radiation, but for most people, when you say radiation, they're thinking nuclear particles, alpha, beta, and gamma rays, Chernobyl meltdown, and so forth. When we're talking about 5G and smart meters, we're talking about radios. Okay.
You like the radio you play in your, you mean?
Well,
like
you're talking radio transmitters, you know, like your walkie-talkies, like your cell phone. Your cell phone's a radio transmitter. Anyway, thank you very much for the phone call, Mark. We're going to let you go. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network, and we're going to switch over here to Tom in Florida. Oh, my goodness, Tom, how are you holding up down there?
Good day to you, Michael. It's a long time I haven't talked to you. Yeah, well, listen, Panama City got hammered pretty hard, I hear. I have a buddy lives up there. Tarpon Springs and all that got spared and all that in the down south. But, yeah, the northern Panhandle up there in Apalachicola got hit pretty good. But there's going to be a lot of construction there, Michael. There'll be a lot of jobs that going back now to construction. You know, that the storms could probably shoot through North Carolina, it looks like, South Carolina, go back out to the Atlantic. But there'll be a lot of jobs created. But listen, the real hurricane I want to talk about, Michael, changing the subject, is Hillary Clinton when she's actually trying to start a race war. And what's going on with Antifa out there in Portland is absolutely disgusting. When they're, you know, and I don't know if you saw the video of the Antifa yelling at the older white guy, calling him a Ku Klux Klansman and all this because he had North Carolina license tagged on his car. Did you see that video?
Yeah, I saw that video, and I saw the video of the Antifa who literally attacked that elderly woman in a wheelchair.
That was disgusting, Michael. And you got Hillary Clinton actually trying. Well, she's just like Maxine Mad Max Waters. This Hillary Mad Max she should probably run with her as I don't know what the hell. But, it's just disgusting what's going on with these leftists, Michael. And the reason I called you really is this hurricane right now is kind of disrupting. I don't know what's going to happen. We're going to have our next election next month. And we got a guy that's running for governor here in Florida named Gillum, who's a full-blown communist and Bolshevik in the way I look at him. He's even talking about reparations and all this. Now, this guy's going to turn the state into Venezuela. I mean, that's the danger we're looking here at now, Michael. These politicians want to turn this country into Venezuela, these Democrats. Look, I was in Cuba, Michael. I told you I was in Cuba 3 months ago.
Yes.
There's nothing to eat there. I told you about that. And Cuba is not a revolution, it's a revolution. The place has been put in the rubble by these communist ideologues and the Bolsheviks, I call them. Like I think you're the one who brought it up one time.
Okay, well, let's back up here a little bit. Let's back up here a little bit and draw a line between ideology and competence, because when Fidel Castro was in charge of Cuba, life there wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. He really did manage the place for the benefit of all the Cuban people, despite the U.S. trade blockade. There are communist leaders who actually do a good job for their people. I think the real issue, though, is competence, because in our media-driven world today, we're seeing people get elected based on how they look on TV and how they dress and how well they present. And they may not be the best qualified people for the job, but we never get to find out about that. Look at the Kavanaugh hearings. We never really got to hear about his judicial opinions. Nobody even really knows if he would actually rule against Roe versus Wade. But it was all about, we've got allegations of sexual assault, and we're going to play to the cameras and play to the masses, because if it bleeds, it leads, and if it thinks, it stinks.
Well, Michael, you're right. But listen, during the Kavanaugh hearings, you had all these young girls out there in Washington on the mall there. And you know what I found out? Every one of those girls are getting paid $1,800 a day by Soros. Or these rich billionaire swine.
I question that number, 1,800 per day. I question that number, 1,800 per day.
Well,
I know they're getting paid,
but a few sites. I think even Matt Drudge had that on the Drudge Report. If I'm not mistaken. I saw it somewhere. I can't remember if it was Drudge or somebody reported that these people are definitely getting paid for protesting Soros and all those other cronies. But
well, I think the people.
I
think the people who actually got into the hearing room and caused a ruckus were being paid that kind of money. But the ones who were just out there on the mall, I mean, right. Soros has got a lot of money, but he doesn't spend it recklessly. I imagine they probably got a few $100 for the day.
Absolutely. But Michael, getting back to Hillary, now she's saying that Bill Clinton was nothing like Brett Kavanaugh as far as these allegations. Well, Bill, you got Anita Broderick actually saying this guy raped me, and why he was in the presidency. I believe. No, was he governor? I can't remember.
Yes, governor of Arkansas.
The main thing you never hear. Okay, he was governor. What you never hear though, Michael, is that there is a young man out there named Danny Williams Clinton.
Yes.
How come that has never been brought out by any media outlet about taking a DNA test like a Maury Povich show? Let's swab their mouth. All you got to do is take a swab, Bill. Danny, take the swab, see if this guy is really his kid. Would Hillary be willing to pay that young man $10 million if Bill Clinton is the father of that kid? She's giving Chelsea millions of dollars. Chelsea's getting millions of dollars. She lives in a massive penthouse in New York City. But Danny Williams Clinton lives there somewhere in Arkansas, and he lives like in a slum. Now, if this kid is this son of Bill Clinton, that should be national headline news. It will destroy the black vote in the United States, Michael, because the black will say what hypocrisy this is, and the black will say they'll either sit out the election or they won't vote at all for a Democrat for all the lies that Hillary perpetrated on the American public and Bill Clinton. Because Danny Williams Clinton looks just like his father, Michael, and you know that. He looks just like him. So there's no doubt in my mind that is the son of Bill Clinton, Michael. And there's no doubt in my mind that Hillary is trying to start a race war in this country. I don't know if she's working for George Soros or somebody, but there's something really horrible going on here.
Yes,
so, I got to get Trump kudos, man, because Trump is trying to stop a lot of this insanity. And I'll tell you, I can tell you a real bunch of stories that I've been taught over the years. But I can tell you from years ago, from experience, from a gentleman I knew who was in intelligence. And he used to tell me all the time, the one that's going to try to take down the United States is not going to be Russia, it's going to be China. So that's another whole subject. But
I question that as well. Why would China want to take us down? Up until recently, we were their biggest customer.
They wouldn't want to take us down because they need us for financial, Michael. They do need us financially to gain for their rebuilding.
That's exactly right here.
Because after all, we have rebuilt China with our money. We have rebuilt them. There's no doubt about it. There's no question about it. The United States' taxpayers have spent billions and billions and billions of dollars to rebuild China. Because if you can recall, when Nixon went to China, China was a closed society.
Yeah.
And in what, 40, 50 years, China's got more. They're a superpower? Because of sheer numbers? Michael, I don't know if you've seen the videos.
Well, hang on a minute. Back up. China was considered a superpower even when Nixon went there because of their nuclear arsenal.
Well, then if that's the case, then I guess Pakistan was considered a superpower. Or India.
Yeah,
India, I believe,
they're considered a nuclear power, and China, again, their population was a factor, but they were already considered a superpower when Nixon went there, and he went to basically open up the country for trade, and it was actually a very good thing that he did, but it was unfortunately overshadowed by that whole Watergate situation. Anyway, Tom, got to let you go. Got another phone call. I need to get back to the news here. There's a lot going on. Al in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I'm sure you know about radio frequency and how it works.
Yes.
You know, how carrier waves work and that.
Yep.
You should maybe touch on it a little bit for some of the people that, are going sideways on this. It's not a big conspiracy theory. You can fit more data in a higher frequency than you can in a lower frequency just because, the data is being carried on that carrier frequency. Let's say 5 gigahertz, 5G now, right?
Yep.
As opposed to 3G. Come on, please, people. Come on. Stop it. You're killing me here. The Earth's been bombarded with radio frequency waves and radiation in general, which all it is just frequency at a higher frequency as opposed to sound, which is lower. We can actually hear it.
Well, sound is not electromagnetic radiation. That's a mechanical effect.
Yeah, but it's still a frequency, and I mean, no one's gonna. I'd be more concerned with. I don't use a cell phone, by the way. I'd be more concerned with having a cell phone up to the side of my head for half of my life than walking around the streets being inundated, quote unquote, with all this frequency radiation, as they call it. So, these people aren't going to create this technology just to kill the consumer because they'd be killing themselves too.
Well, unfortunately, corporate responsibility in this day and age is not there. And if corporations feel that they're making money, they're going to ignore indications the products might be harmful. Now, if you're concerned about your cell phone, which has to be transmitting powerfully enough to reach the cell tower, then that's why a Bluetooth headset is a good idea. Because you're taking that powerful transmitter away from your head, putting it on your belt, and that little Bluetooth headset only has to put out enough radio energy to reach down to your belt. And so it's a much less powerful transmitter.
Yeah. And you can go one step further and you can just have the old-fashioned earbuds, the analog things.
Well, unfortunately, in a lot of places, you can't drive with those. In fact, in a lot of states, you can't drive with your cell phone up to your ear. Here in Hawaii, if you're seen using your cell phone in your car, it's a $300 fine. And I think that's one of the reasons why so many of the new cars coming on out will interface with your smartphone. So you can just leave it there down below and, do hands-free.
Yeah. For those people that have to have their phone in their hands because, there's something wrong, that's great. Just touching on what Dustin said about the Intel new chips. So what they did is XMP, it wasn't enabled on the AMD boards, which basically tightens up the timings and boosts the frequency of the memory.
Yes.
They also used a gaming mode on the Ryzen 2700X, which basically disables half the cores. It's intended for the Threadripper because of the way the cores are situated. Half the cores don't have direct access to the on-die cache, or I should say memory controller. And what they also did, and this is the most obvious one, is they put on a kick-ass cooler. Pardon me. A really good cooler on the Intel.
In any event, listen, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials.
Anyways, Mike.
And we're going to come back, and we're going to get back to the news. I'm not trying to turn this place into a tech corner. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And boy, Mother Nature's just on a rampage today. Papua New Guinea just got rocked by a 7.3 earthquake. And there are tsunami warnings being issued for parts of the Western Pacific. They are unable to determine if there is a tsunami threat to us here in Hawaii just yet, but as you can imagine, I'm going to be keeping a little bit of an eye on that webpage for the rest of the day here. Anyway, so getting on back to the news. As I mentioned before when we started talking about the economy, the Dow took a major clubbing today, over 800 points, over 3% down. It's the third largest single-day drop in stock market history. And especially toward the end there, you could almost start to feel people were panicking because it was down. Then it hit 600, and then it really started dropping. And so I'm going to be taking a look at those futures for tomorrow. This could be the beginning of the great bailout. This could be the beginning of the correction. And I know the plunge protection team is going to try and stop that. But too many people know about these shenanigans. Now, as you know, one of the areas of contention that the United States has with China is the continent of Africa. And China now has a naval base in Africa, and they're pouring in all kinds of investment to try and basically make money, to gain access to some of those natural resources in a peaceful way. And so Donald Trump has come on out with an announcement that he intends to rival China's investment in Africa with what he calls the BUILD Act, the Better Utilization of Investments Leading to Development Act. And basically will put up $60 billion in funds for promoting U.S. corporate investment in Africa. We'll see how that works out here. There has been a bit of an upset in the bond market on the order of hundreds of billions of dollars, and that may trigger a run. They're concerned it may be the worst run since 1976. So the indicators are definitely not good. And that caller who called in yesterday and said, why are you always being negative? We're not being negative. We're trying to gauge what's actually happening. We're trying to get past corporate media assurances that everything is fine, everything is wonderful. You know, I'm starting to feel like a steerage passenger on the Titanic after it hit that iceberg, and the crew was telling those steerage passengers, it's okay, you can stay in your room, you're going to be fine here. And yes, the first class passengers are heading for the lifeboats, but we'll get around to you soon, everything's going to be fine. It's feeling a lot like that. Over in Europe, the EU supervisors are taking another look at the Italian bank liquidity because Italian government bond yields are blowing out to the highest levels in 4 years. And so people are pulling their money out of the banks and buying the bonds, and that's creating a liquidity crisis for the Italian banks. As I mentioned before to that caller, this tariff standoff between the United States and China is going to take a toll in years to come. This is coming from the IMF, and it's reducing its growth forecast for the U.S. and China, citing the series of tariffs the two nations have imposed on each other. And Maurice Obstfeld, the IMF's chief economist, said when you have the world's two largest economies at odds, that's a situation where everybody suffers, and I'm in agreement. Story coming on out of Zero Hedge. The United States is saying there will be no trade talks with China at the G20 unless China makes early concessions. This is coming out of the Financial Times. And again, this is a tactic that we have seen the United States, not to mention Israel, using more and more. It's a bullying tactic. You give us what we want first, and then we'll talk about doing something nice for you. I think China's probably going to go to the G20 and say, if you want to talk with us, we're around. If you don't want to talk with us, that's fine too. Speaking of China, one of the areas in which they've been expanding is seaports. And ports are big business. They make a lot of money because those cargo ships and passenger ships that are going in and out, they don't get to park for free. There are all kinds of port fees, and of course, there's a charge for loading and unloading the cargo ships, putting the cargo containers on those trucks, sending them off. And China has been investing in ports all over the world. And right now, they hold stakes in over a dozen ports in Europe. And a lot of people are saying how China's just taking over the oceans. They're already basically running the Panama Canal. Bringing back the days of Zheng He, I guess. But it is good business. And that's what China's about, being a good business. China had money. They were they still are a manufacturing superpower that gave them the money to go on out and start buying up control of assets in other countries. They're making deals. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking about the economy, and I just got sent an article from Zero Hedge saying that in the after-hours trading, the Dow is already down 1,000. I'm looking to confirm. I want to be absolutely certain that we're going in the right direction on this information. But it's looking like this could be the beginning of the collapse everybody has said was on its way. Meanwhile, getting on back to the rest of the world, as you know, India is facing U.S. sanctions over its decision to purchase Russia's S-400 missile system. And basically, what's going on is that the former ambassador of India to Saudi Arabia is saying India should be cautious, but their strategy right now is that within 6 months, the entire sanctions regime is going to fall apart. And he may be right, because the world is really getting sick and tired of it. We already saw how Europe was resistant to going along with the new sanctions on Iran. Speaking of Iran, top officials in the U.S. Treasury Department are pushing for Iran to remain connected to the SWIFT global payment network ahead of the implementation of new economic sanctions in November. Now, why on earth would Iran stay connected to SWIFT when SWIFT is the instrument that can be used to enforce the sanctions? Iran would be much better off severing connection with SWIFT and going with one of the parallel systems that have been set up operating outside of U.S. control. And obviously Iran is clearly thinking in those directions, or these officials at the Treasury Department wouldn't be making a stink about it. Okay, this next story, kind of a little weird. We know that over the last several years, there have been a lot of very suspicious deaths of banking officials flying off the top of parking garages. It's always declared a suicide or, murder unrelated to the work. The latest one is this former assistant to Goldman Sachs CEO, John Solomon, apparently committed suicide yesterday. Now, the story we're being given is that was the day he was expected to plead guilty in federal court to stealing more than $1 million of rare wine from his former boss. So, according to Bloomberg, Nicholas DeMayer, 41 years old, jumped from his 33rd floor room at the Carlyle Hotel on Manhattan's East Side. And, yeah, stealing $1 million of rare wine, that's a serious situation. But apparently he was going to plead guilty, which sounds to me like he did it. He knew he did it. I'm wondering if somebody took advantage of his day in court to maybe take out another witness to some of the skullduggery that's going on behind the scenes. I'm not buying a guy who's this successful committing suicide over basically, it's a grand theft wine. It doesn't feel right to me here. Story coming out of Investment Watch blog, rising interest rates start popping bubbles. The end of this expansion is now in sight. That certainly appears accurate. Sears has now hired advisors to prepare for their bankruptcy filing. So in the supposed economic recovery and boom times where the jobs are coming on back and, you know, everybody is singing huzzah, 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 yet another historic, iconic retailer is getting ready to close here. Now, Peter Schiff, in an interview on Russia Today, has come on out and said that real wages for Americans have fallen further than the official statistics would indicate. Oh, my stars and garters, the government has lied to us about the economic numbers again. All right. Let's talk about San Francisco. Let's talk about what's really going on in this country. And there is this article called The Land of the Living Dead inside San Francisco's most disgusting city block. San Francisco used to be a beautiful city. Claire and I stayed there briefly when I was working on The Day After Tomorrow. And frankly, if the company that I was doing the work for had offered me a permanent job, we probably would have moved at that point. In hindsight, glad we did not. It has really deteriorated. San Francisco has become notorious for having some of the dirtiest major city blocks in the United States. Things have gotten so bad that the city has finally been forced to employ full-time workers that are earning almost $200,000 per year to clean up the human feces on the ground, along with heroin needles and litter. And frankly, given the job description, $200,000 a year is nowhere near enough. And the New York Times came on out to basically highlight what was going on in San Francisco, and they chose Hyde Street, one of the dirtiest streets in the city. And this area is just 15 minutes away from technology giants like Twitter and Uber, but you'd never know by looking at it. Now, the worst parts of Hyde Street are in the middle of the city's Tenderloin neighborhood. And for the people who call this block home, it's difficult to reconcile San Francisco's liberal politics with the misery that surrounds them. And I'm sorry to hear this, because when Claire and I stayed in San Francisco, we stayed in this little small rental on Hyde Street. And back then, it was a nice place. It was a good energy here. But there is this huge crisis taking place in the streets of America, and it's called homelessness. And the corporate media doesn't want you to look at that. The corporate media wants to assure you that everything is going just fine. You know, we're a great nation. We're exceptional. Everybody around the rest of the world sits up nights to admire us. This article basically says it's hard to know the exact numbers of homeless because they're always moving around. They get chased out of one area, they go someplace else. There's really no way to accurately count. A lot of people are just going to temporary shelters. There's really no way to count it. We don't know the scale of the problem. And Los Angeles is estimating 50,000 homeless. New York City, 75,000 homeless. We have 8,000 here on this island, and this is a little tiny island. And these men and women, and increasingly children, are the collateral damage of the corporate state. And the lack of stable jobs that pay a living wage in the gig and temp work economy, the collapse of mental health and medical services for the poor, and gentrification are turning America into just this gulag for hundreds of thousands of its citizens. Meanwhile, of course, the refugees and the illegal immigrants come in and they get free stuff. So it's a bad situation here. Now, Mitch McConnell is setting the stage for the border wall funding battle in what will be the lame duck session after the elections. And they're pushing for the funds for the border wall. And of course, the Democrats are saying, no, it's too expensive, it's too expensive, it's too expensive. Here's the irony in that. Paying for all the illegal immigrant births is actually costing more than the border wall. Now, you would think the Democrats could use a calculator and say the wall costs this much, the births, taking care of all the births costs this much more. Gee, we'd save money by having the wall. But they're not really concerned about the money. The Democrats are desperate to flood this country with illegal immigrants and get them to vote in order to just seize total control over our political system. Forever. And they'll turn this nation into a third world slum, like they're doing in San Francisco, like they did in Baltimore. And they don't own this country. We, the American people, do. This nation, its quality of life, was built up generation after generation after generation of Americans working to make a better life for their children. And the Democrats are now grabbing it and bartering it away for votes. We really have reached the bread and circuses stage in this country. Okay, so right now, Brett Kavanaugh is up there at the Supreme Court. He's already gone to work here. And there's a Supreme Court immigration case that Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh are probably going to have an impact on. The administration is arguing for sweeping government authority to detain immigrants awaiting deportation after they complete sentences for criminal convictions, even if it's years after leaving prison. So there's a revelation there that criminal illegal immigrants, after they finished their jail sentences, were just being released back into the population. And many of them have been caught repeating their criminal activity. The question I have is, why aren't they just being deported immediately after leaving prison? They're illegal immigrants, they're convicted criminals. What is wrong with the deportation process? Let's go out and get those guys who do the pumpkin chunkin'. We're coming up on that because this time of year, you know, with all their air cannons, and set up along that border and take all these illegal immigrant criminals and chunk them back across the border into Mexico. And the longest distance and the most bounce get the trophy. But we got to do something. The way the system is set up now, it works for the Democrats. It doesn't work for the American people. Okay, we're going to take a phone call now from Rick in Arizona. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I don't know. That stock market little tumble today. You know, not Peter Schiff, but Max Kaiser a while back said that they've been slowly shrinking the stock market in slow motion to where the stock market volume and the trades are half the size it was at its peak in 96, and it's 25% smaller than it was in 1976.
Yeah.
So what we have here is this, you know, universe of money standing on top of this small little city of companies, which basically gives the total, I mean, the market can be controlled. I mean, the sellers, I mean, there's all this money is just saturating the available shares on the market. So they really got control of the market. You know, it's like they got control of the selling and the buying. I mean, it's not like in the 1930s where you couldn't control these wildcat sellers, or even in 87 when it dropped down to 22%. Everybody is like webbed in, you know, the webinars, and they're all connected. And I'm just calling to tell you, I don't think we're going to have a stock market crash. I think they got control of it.
Well,
like Eustace Mullins once said.
I would like to hope that you are correct, but we have heard so many times through the years where Wall Street will say, well, we've got control. What happened before cannot happen again. And then it happens again. Right now, I'm trying to get more confirmation on what the after-hours trading is doing. But it looked to me like the last few moments of the trading day, people were definitely hitting the panic button. After it crossed 600 down, it really took off, and it ended up more than 800 down on the Dow. And everybody got hit. NASDAQ, S&P. The market is hideously overvalued. And that's a reality that everybody has to look at, because decades of driving the stock prices up to use as a political banner has disconnected the prices from the actual worth of the underlying stocks. And what that means is that when the panic hits, the first ones to get out will get their money. And everybody else is going to be left holding their last report from the broker with a very impressive looking number on the bottom, and that's all it's going to be, an impressive looking number.
Yeah, it's hard to say, but there's one thing that one of Trump's cronies, what the hell was Gary Cohen, before he quit, the market was going down. He said, just remember the stock market crash of 1987 when it went down 22% in one day. I'm not in the market, but if I was, I don't know if I'd sell or not. Maybe I'd sell at the top right now, but I'd get back into it again. Because after all the crashes that we've had, now look at that, it's at 26,000. Even if it goes down to 20,000, everybody's still ahead. It's all unless you've been buying up, unless you've been foolish to be buying at this point. But even if it goes down to 18,000, I had a 401k in 2014 that I cashed out, which was a small amount of money. But if I would have left it in, on the aggressive side of their options, should have tripled or quadrupled. But I just took the money. So I guess we could be shook up with the stock market unless the bond market's the real deal, Mike.
Yeah, that's where there's a big problem there.
That's where the real pain could come in. That's what could really cause all the preppers to be told you so. The stocks is different, but the bond market's never crashed. And I can tell you, the mob has their money in the bond market. They always have. The Western Conference Teamsters Fund with all those Teamsters members in Vegas, that money all goes into bonds. None of it's ever gone into the stock market. So the bond market, people, is what you got to be concerned about. The stock market could go down, down, down. But like Gary Cohen said, back in '87, it dropped down to 22% in one day. And it all came back. So anyways, Mike, thanks for taking my call.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call. And I certainly don't want to see a crash. But there are so many experts out there saying it's overdue. Ron Paul was saying this one could be 50%. And it's going to hurt a lot of people who don't deserve to be hurt, like the holders of 401ks. All righty. And I'm not in the stock market. I've never been in the stock market. But for those people who are, I imagine they're going to be very nervous trying to figure out what that opening bell is going to be like tomorrow. Okay, we're coming up here on a commercial break. We have a caller waiting on the line, and we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go right to the phones to Mark in Oklahoma. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. Good afternoon. I tried to get on a few minutes ago or 20 minutes ago talking about smart meters. And the topic typically goes to, well, we put these smart meters in to save people having to go out and read meters. Well, I've got a ranch out in western Oklahoma, and it crosses the boundaries of 3 different electrical suppliers. And, 15 years ago, what we would do was we would get a card in the mail, we fill out our usage on it, and a lot of these different places, it's a pole to a well pumping water for cattle. And you kind of get a feel for how much your usage was. You just write that down on the card. And then once a year, they would come out and audit it and make sure it was right.
Okay.
Well, about 10 years ago, they quit doing that. And they knew how much usage, and this is on the old analog meters. So they were using data. I was curious about it. So they started using data over wire to read what your electric usage was, and they would just send you a bill for it. And, you know, now they've changed them all over to smart meters, so they say no one has to come read it. Well, that wasn't the case before. And we have smart meters on poles that set in, 400 acres that are pumping water to cattle, and the whole meter reader issue is false, in my opinion.
Okay. No, I remember, when I was younger, there was a great deal of trust in the consumer. We had the same system when I was living in New Hampshire. Is you'd fill out a card for what the little dials on the meter said, you'd send it in. And every once in a while they'd come out and check to make sure you weren't cheating, but hardly anybody ever did, so it really wasn't an issue. But again, I think this issue about the smart meters, along with 5G, it's being overblown, and I suspect it's from rival commercial interests. There are still parts of the country that have not gone over to the smart meters, and the people who are being paid to read the meters there are probably very concerned about losing their job. I don't know if they have a union. If they do, the union may have hired a public relations firm to try and create a public pushback against the smart meters. That's how these things do get done.
Right. Well, I find it curious that they would spend of course, the money is being subsidized from somewhere to put all these meters in place in remote locations, as well as in all of the urban areas. And I think there's something more to it. I don't know what that is. But.
Well, I imagine the meters in the remote locations can't use Wi-Fi. They're probably using the cellular telephone system.
May very well be.
I mean, that would definitely be a way to do it.
Taking my call.
Okay, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here, and we're coming up here on our station identification, and when we come on back, Jason Eastman of Armor Combat Systems will be our guest. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. We're still connecting with Jason right now. Meanwhile, over at InfoWars, they are running a story saying that Hillary Clinton is going to run again in 2020, that she's the presumptive Democratic nominee, and that it doesn't matter who votes for who in the primary, she will be given all the delegates. 2016 all over again. Hey, isn't Trump doing a good job? Okay, Jason's ready now. So joining us on the phone now is Jason Eastman, and Jason Eastman just started up a new company called Armor Combat Systems, and he's one of our newest advertisers. And the reason I asked him onto the show is I get a lot of email about this specific type of product that he is offering. So Jason, welcome to the show.
Hi, Michael. Nice to meet you.
And tell us about Armor Combat Systems and what it is that you're selling and why it's important in our current culture.
Well, we carry ballistic backpacks for children and adults. And why this is important is because, well, when we watch the news every day, we see the things that remind us that we need some form of passive self-defense that we can take with us in multiple locations. These are TSA compliant as well.
And you just got the company started, right? You're just cranking it up.
Yep, we're brand new.
Okay. Well, obviously, that's something a lot of people are looking at because not just the school shootings, but the police are out there firing wild. I remember in New York City, there was this incident where the police were trying to take down a suspect, and they hit something like 9 bystanders by accident. And so it really is out of control there a little bit. So these ballistic backpacks, I presume they look like ordinary backpacks. They're probably a lot heavier. And what kind of caliber ammunition will they stop?
Okay, first of all, the backpacks are surprisingly light. A lot of them, especially the child-sized ones, only weigh about 20 ounces.
Really?
They're rated 3A. They're designed to stop .357, .44, 9mm, .45 caliber hollow point ammunition, and and more. So.
Well, I'm surprised at how light they are. I mean, can you reveal what stops the bullets? I would have assumed it was going to be some form of Kevlar, but maybe there's something new out there.
That's exactly correct. It's DuPont Kevlar. They've really come a long way with these. The child size ones, like I said, they're very light. The adult size ones are going to be heavier. You have more material. Plus, the adult size ones have a front and a back panel, so you have front and back ballistic protection.
Okay, so it wraps around the chest and sort of buttons in the front with a panel. Okay, that looks very interesting. I'm almost tempted to get one of these things myself, given how many people do not like me. So give us some specific examples of the different products here. I mean, describe some of the individual items.
Well, okay, like your Canvas Classic Pack runs for about $210, and basically, this is features like a minimalist silhouette for a stylish and ultra light backpack that's ideal for everyday use. Perfectly sized to be used in a school bag for a teenager or a day pack for a small adult woman. Like I said, it has a Kevlar insert that's sewn in, and this is something that you can take with you on an airplane. It's TSA compliant. It's referred to as passive protection because you're not going to take a backpack and throw it at somebody or anything like that. But these are very versatile. They're very light, and in this day and age, very useful.
I was going to ask you about that. I mean, wouldn't getting on board a plane with basically body armor raise a red flag? I know not too long ago there was a big push to outlaw body armor for civilians, for ordinary citizens. Fortunately, that never got any traction.
Correct.
And again, it's passive stuff. Now, this clear backpack, I'm looking at your website right now. I'm going to assume that the bulletproof protection is up against the back of the wearer, which is why you can have the clear backpack, everything showing through, which again, that's going to make TSA relax because they can see inside and there won't be anything. So right now, basically, you have these 5 different product lines, and you also sell additional ballistic inserts. Are the inserts required for the backpacks, or the backpacks will work as advertised without them?
The backpacks already have an insert that comes with them.
Okay, so you're selling these inserts to sort of retrofit onto other items people might already own that they wish to make bulletproof. Okay.
Correct. Let's just say you have a favorite pack that you want to already put something in. Yeah.
All right. Well, that would be really good. I'm looking at this tactical backpack. It's got lots of pockets, and if there's one thing I like, it's lots and lots of pockets here. So, I mean, have you had much demand yet? I mean, I know you're just starting out here, but have you had much demand for these yet?
The big thing is that a lot of people don't even know these types of things are available on the commercial market. It's one of those, if you don't know that you don't know. Mostly people think of body armor as something big and heavy that the police and the military wear. They don't think of it as for civilian use, and they don't think of it as something that they can carry in a bag that's light and functional.
Well, I can imagine, especially for the ones that wrap around the front, we need to get the word out there because the United States has become a very dangerous place. Looking at the Antifa riot up there in Portland, now, to the best of my knowledge, nobody was shooting anybody, but still having a little bit of passive protection. And I understand, obviously, being a backpack, that it doesn't protect much more than the torso. But how resistant is the Kevlar to, for example, a knife blade?
It will offer knife resistance. You have to realize that blades are a different dynamic than a bullet. Bullet's more of a blunt force trauma than a knife. A knife is a design matter separator. Some would even argue that knives predate fire in civilization. So it is such a fundamental thing as far as any civilization to have a knife.
Yes.
Funny you mentioned that. But yeah. It would add another layer. I know that there has been concern about knife attacks, especially with groups like ISIS and whatnot. That's been published a lot in mainstream media. So people are concerned about that as well.
Okay, so let's see. These products are basically aimed at adolescent, teen, adult backpacks, children backpack. It's a small inventory to get started here, but I do wish you a lot of success. And
well, thank you.
I've kind of run out of things to talk about here. And all I can do is there anything else you want to share with our listeners about what you do and why?
Well, like I said, we're starting off with this line of products. Eventually, we'll be moving into integrative combat training, where we will be teaching things like active shooter first aid survival, basically dealing with how to use things like shirts and whatnot to make a tourniquet if you were unfortunate enough to be involved in an active shooter situation. But that's going to be more on a local area in the northwest of the United States. And that's going to be another dimension to the website that we'll be adding in the months to come.
All right. Well, that sounds really good. And again, what was your motivation for starting this company?
I saw a need.
Okay.
I saw, people were scared, and it was like, well, so I reached out and I started finding things, and I find things.
Okay, so you're not actually manufacturing these; you're finding them from other suppliers.
No, we carry the bullet blocker and the leatherback gear line of ballistic backpacks. We will be expanding into other lines later on.
All right, that's good. Okay, Jason, I have to be honest. I've run out of things to talk about. I do like your products.
That's okay.
I'm probably going to look at one of them. I would certainly advise our listeners who are concerned about the violence in our streets to look at these products. And yes, they're pricey. Do they come with a guarantee?
They do come with a warranty, and like I said, these items are something that has been in high demand. I know some of the ballistic manufacturing items. You can have a lead time of something like 14 to 21 days, depending on the manufacturer, to even ship. So if you're concerned about something happening, you might have to wait. The reason why we have these in stock is so that if somebody wants one right now, they can get it shipped next day.
Okay. All right. That sounds really, really good. Okay. I've run out of things to talk about here, and I wanted to go longer with you, but at least we introduced you to our listeners. So once again, this is Jason Eastman. He's just started a new company called Armor Combat Systems, where you can get basically bulletproof backpacks, and you can get them now without having to wait weeks for some of the other suppliers and manufacturers.
Correct.
So hopefully you'll take a look at his website. The ad is right at the top of our main page. And Jason, thank you for sharing time with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. All right. Well, that was Jason. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And getting on back to the news, the hurricane is hurricaning. The storm surge is apparently on the Panhandle was up to like 12 feet. And there's a lot of owners of beachfront homes who are probably going to be having to deal with that. But right now, the wind gusts near the eye of the storm are at 155 miles per hour. And apparently they've got search and rescue teams out already for people who recklessly went out into the storm. And I got to be honest, people have been sending me these videos where they're basically out driving around taking video of the storm, even though all of the officials were saying, stay home, shelter in place. You don't go out in one of these things. All right, getting on back to immigration and globalism. Over in Arizona, Kyrsten Sinema is the Democratic nominee in the Arizona Senate race. And because Arizona is very much in favor of border control, her current political website seems to indicate she would support that as well. But apparently back in 2006, she wrote a group email in which she drew equivalence between the deaths of people trying to illegally cross into the U.S. to American soldiers fighting and dying in Iraq. In one way, she was absolutely right. the immigrants are invading our country. Apparently, when detailing her views on immigration in a profile from 2009, Kirsten Sinema said, "I oppose all of them," meaning the immigration laws, a stance that does appear to differ from her current policy positions. So you got to be really careful. It's election season. Politicians will say whatever they think you want to hear to get your vote. Speaking of getting your vote, over in Germany, polls are slipping around Angela Merkel's leadership, and they're coming up on a key state elections, and it may indicate that Merkel is just not really doing well. Apparently, the Christian Social Union, which is a sister party to Merkel's Christian Democratic Union, is at 33% in Bavaria, down from around 40 just a few months ago. The Greens Party is 18%, followed by the Alternative for Germany Party at 14%. It does really take a while for an idea to spread through a population. There's a lot of inertia. People don't want to hear about these things. They're set in their ways. They've got their ideas. But given enough time, yeah, the idea that open borders are bad is definitely spreading, not just through Germany, but through all of the European Union. Getting on back down to Israel, Netanyahu basically has renewed his attacks on non-Jewish infiltrators. He was speaking at a Likud conference in Tel Aviv, and Netanyahu is linking the new Jewish nation state law to the issue of non-Jewish African migrants, which is what Netanyahu is calling the infiltrators, in order to make them seem more negative than they are. And he says the infiltrator problem is an extremely difficult and painful one. We need to ensure the welfare of those who are needy. And basically, Netanyahu is saying the issue of non-Jewish migrants was one of the reasons why I pushed the nationality law forward, stating that the law creates a balance for the claims that there are unlimited rights. So Israel thinks open borders are great for every nation, except, of course, for Israel. Okay. Up in New York, Mayor de Blasio has signed a bill into law that will allow New York City residents to select a third gender category on their birth certificates without having to get approval from a medical professional. And de Blasio came on out and said New Yorkers should be free to tell the government who they are, not the other way around. So beginning the first of the year, there's going to be a non-binary identity category known as X will be available on birth certificates and other official government documents for city residents who don't consider themselves male or female. So all anybody needs to do is submit an affidavit saying that I'm somewhere in between, and they can use the third box. I mean, this is just getting silly. This is just getting silly. Story coming out of mommyunderground.com. Brown University published an article in PLOS One, the Public Library of Science peer-reviewed journal, that proved adolescents are becoming transgender mainly due to peer and societal influence. They're being pressured into it. I mean, it's a peer group thing. And heading up the research is Brown University's own Dr. Lisa Littman, a physician and researcher. And then there was a huge outcry from the transgender community. How dare you say we're pressuring these kids into saying they're transgender? And Brown University removed support of the article and apologized all over the place. Oh, we're sorry. We're sorry we offended you, whatever the heck it is you are. And there was a complaint filed by trans activists. Brown University issued basically withdrew the press release talking about the research study. When you reach a point where politics overrule science, you're in a very, very dangerous place. We're going to start having people demanding that pi be set exactly to 3.0 because that's what it says in the Bible. We've already seen the hysteria over human-caused global warming. We don't need science. We have belief. We have faith. That was one of the big problems with the Dark Ages. And it may be an indicator we're already heading into there. Is that all of these civilizations, they abandoned science in favor of religious fanaticism, especially in Europe. Now, this I find to be just a little bit nitpicky. Apparently, over in Virginia, several towns in the Hampton Roads area have actually passed, what would you call it? Not exactly a law, but a guideline, basically saying that kids over the age of 12 are not allowed to go trick or treating for Halloween. That they face fines and even jail time. I mean, seriously? Do you not have more important things to be doing than that? Now, when I was a kid, Halloween was Halloween. And kids would dress up in costumes. We usually made our own. We didn't have all these store-bought costumes here. And some of the adults would dress up. I remember this cousin, she just made this incredible ghost outfit. And if you show up at my door in a costume, you get a candy. I'm not going to be checking your age. I think this is ridiculous. This really is getting into too intrusive. It really is too intrusive. Saying that kids over 12 can't trick or treat. That to me is just silly. And maybe these city councils are doing this because they can't solve any real problems and they want to look like they're at least doing something. Like cutting the profits of the candy companies. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And I want to go on back to the economic news here for a little bit. The story that the Dow futures were down by 1,000 points apparently originated at MarketWatch. They have now retracted that, saying it was an error. And they're saying that the Dow futures are actually ticking up a few points. I'm not sure which way to believe. Time will solve that mystery. But I can imagine that people inside the stock market are going to do anything they can to try and hold this together a little bit longer. But I basically yanked the story from my website. I don't want to start a panic, but I wasn't able to corroborate it, and now it turns out it was a mistake from MarketWatch. Alrighty, getting on back to political correctness. Here's an interesting little story. The snowflake culture is killing our kids. And it's talking about all this very bizarre requirements to be politically correct. You know, applause, clapping. Has been banned at a leading university in Great Britain to avoid triggering anxiety. Now you've got to do jazz hands. Got to do jazz hands. Ooh, that's how you show your approval. We don't want to cause anxiety in the students here. And interestingly enough, there was a high school. It has announced they're doing away with class rank, valedictorian, and salutatorian because it's just too stressful for kids to lose. They can't cope. I mean, part of growing up is learning to deal with real life. And this whole snowflake culture, it's creating a very weak, emotionally weak, unresilient population. Now, maybe that's part of their plan to control everybody. You know, do what I tell you or I'll say a bad word. Which they already kind of do that anyway. But I think they're doing these kids a disservice. When did sticks and stones may break my bones, but names can never hurt me become irrelevant? So, speaking of schools, apparently out in California, at a high school, there was an incident at Herbert Hoover High School in Glendale where the kids basically got into a brawl, which resulted in the police being called and several student suspensions. And apparently it got triggered by friction between the various refugee populations. Parents are saying their children, there's a racial tension on campus between the Armenian students, who are apparently the largest ethnic group in the school. This is Glendale, California. And the Armenians are the majority population here. And they got into a tussle with the football team, who are mostly Black, Latino, and other ethnicities. One of the parents saying, this is what's stressing out the students. They can't concentrate. And you're going to love this one. Over at the BBC, they're pushing the SJW LBTQQICAP F2K agenda. They have hired a British Iraqi, gay, non-binary Muslim to explain why quantum physics determines gender identity. Now, I know a little about quantum physics, and I think this is a load of nonsense, but this is the BBC. And by the way, for those of you out there who watch BBC, I don't know about you, I was a little disappointed in the season premiere for Doctor Who. And I don't have a problem with the new Doctor being a woman, and she's very bright and very energetic. I just thought the script was weak. For a season premiere, the script was just formulaic. It's the same thing that we've seen time and time again. Of course, after all these years, it's probably hard to come up with a really radically new idea, but I think somebody at BBC needs to do that, because I think the franchise is just worn out here. And of course, it's all politically correct, completely mixed race cast, you know, a female Doctor Who. This witch hunt climate that arose out of the Kavanaugh hearings is starting to get a little out of hand. Apparently, up at the University of Washington, students created a website to allow users to anonymously post the names of men who have allegedly committed sexual assault. And the website is called Make Them Scared UW. It does not vet any of the accusations in any meaningful way. It's just a place where people can log on in and say, this man did this nasty thing to me. Shun him, shun him. The only problem is it's opening up the University of Washington to massive defamation lawsuits. And I hope those students sue who get named on that website. We're going to be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're talking about this feminist witch hunt mentality that all men are presumed guilty, that women should be believed, that they would never, ever, 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 ever lie about something as serious as rape, when history is definitely very much against them on that one. So there's an article that came on out here saying that empirical research and data matter too. And it's saying basically the liberals have made a cottage industry of using sensitive and explosive issues to hatch political movements like Me Too, Black Lives Matter, Hands Up, Don't Shoot, and now this taking a knee during the national anthem in the NFL. And this exploitation causes a lot of harm to what otherwise might be legitimate claims about rape, police use of force, sexual harassment. And we're already starting to see a pushback where men are saying, I'm not going to hire a woman into my office because somewhere down the road she could hit me with, you know, this false rape charge. So this is actually causing harm to women. And the same thing happened back in the 1990s during that whole militant feminist male bash rape crisis climate. It wound up with ordinary women who were real victims of rape being ignored. But the people who are driving these political movements, they don't really care about women or blacks. They're just pawns to be used in their political games here. They don't care about the truth. It's just winning. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Glenn in Philadelphia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I wanted to mention something about that make them scared thing, which I think you might have been just talking about as well. But you just said something about hiring women. Well, it's not just hiring women. In this day and age, it could be anyone making a false accusation. I mean, another talk show host just had a case of someone who said that, though he didn't, make any advances or do anything appropriate, he thought he was grooming him for gay sex, and that was just an allegation that was made. So, am I on? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine here, but
okay.
The overwhelming...
So anybody can make...
Hang on. The overwhelming preponderance of these false allegations are generally women against men. And yes, there may be a few gays who are playing the same game, but the public perception is this is a big problem. Remember back in 2014, Rolling Stone wrote this article about this brutal gang rape at the University of Virginia. Then they had to retract that. Turned out to be completely false. Back in 2006, the accusations against innocent members of the Duke University lacrosse team. There have been cases where women have agreed to consensual sex, then regretted it the next day. What happens if what happens if a couple breaks up and the woman gets revenge by saying he raped me?
Right. Yeah, shades of the 90s, as you say. But I'm wondering if there's any way in which, like, the I Am Spartacus approach could help. Everybody just like everybody is a suspect. Everybody is. But I think the only thing I see working. Okay, well, I want to make one point. I think foundationally, the reason this stuff happens, and I try to make this point all the time, is because of the ethical, clarion call of situational ethics that says the ends justify the means.
Yes.
This allows this, when someone believes that their cause is just, and therefore anything in the way of lying or false accusations, anything they do is justified because of their ends.
Yes.
So that's that's the foundational problem. And then our society has to, just as we saw in the Kavanaugh controversy, we've got to get back to an understanding of the presumption of innocence and due process and all that.
Yes,
President Trump made a mistake when he issued his public apology to Kavanaugh the other day. He said something about that he had been proven innocent, and that is a huge legal faux pas.
Yes.
No one is ever proven innocent. That's proving a negative, okay? No one is ever proven innocent. They are presumed innocent.
That's
always
true.
Until proven guilty. So all these things, return to getting away from consequentialist ethics and understanding the importance of presumption of innocence and due process and the right to due process for all accused. If we give this up, we're not America.
Well, we're not giving it up. We're fighting to keep it as much as possible. But the liberals, they want to take that away. They want a world in which they can, denounce people and send them off to the guillotine without so much as a trial.
Right. And if that doesn't tell someone that they're dealing with something that would degenerate into persecutory, intolerant tyranny, and horrible miscarriages of justice, they just don't understand even the most rudimentary ideas of law, and things that make society work. So
yes.
All right, Mike. That's all I had.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here, and you need to go back and you need to look at history. These things do happen. The LaSalle basketball players were accused of rape, and they were dragged through the media. Their lives were made very difficult. They lost scholarships and other opportunities because of it, and in the end, they were exonerated. Now, Melania Trump has come on out saying that the Me Too movement is important, but women and men should also have hard evidence when making allegations of sexual assault. She says, I support the women and they need to be heard. We need to support them. And also men, not just women. But you need to have really hard evidence that if you are accused of something or you're accusing somebody of something, show the evidence. She's absolutely right. She's not only our hottest first lady, she's got brains. Monica Lewinsky had evidence, remember? So, anyway, getting on back to what happened up in Portland, there is something going on there where they're trying to portray Antifa as the victims. And there's a video of these Black Lives Matter attacking an old lady in a wheelchair. They were simply surrounded a white guy and screamed that he's a member of the KKK. Very uncivil behavior. And apparently there was one guy who drove away from the protest, the mob, in his car. Didn't hit anybody, didn't knock anybody down. The Portland police want to charge him with crimes. So why is Black Lives Matter and Antifa so protected? Here's a good illustration of what's going on. This came out of Judicial Watch. Up in UC Berkeley, there was this teacher who sued to block Judicial Watch from obtaining public records about her violent Antifa activism. And a federal judge basically threw it out of court saying it's entirely frivolous. So this, actually it's a middle school teacher, Yvette Filarka, and she's a national organizer for a leftist radical group. And last year, Judicial Watch filed a California Public Records Act request to get information about her violent activism. Now, she turned around and said, I'm the victim of a political witch hunt, and she sued in district court to keep the records private. The judge said, no, this is frivolous. All right. Remember Jamie Lee Curtis? Very outspoken advocate for gun control. Guns are bad. We've got to get rid of the guns here. Seen her new movie, Halloween? She's walking around there with a gun. She's going to shoot Michael Myers. Put him out of his misery. Again, a little bit of hypocrisy. You have all these Hollywood stars who make movies with guns from which they make lots of money. And then they go on out and they do the liberal thing. Oh, guns are bad. You shouldn't have guns. Well, if guns are bad, stop making movies glorifying guns. Like Shooter, which is all over the cable channels right now here. Getting on back to the NFL, they have done something which I'm sure they thought was going to solve the problem of the kneeling, but it has enraged the fans. Instead of marching across the field with the flag of the United States of America, they have created a new flag. And it's a single white stripe, a single red stripe, and a single blue stripe, and there are some stars on the blue stripe. It's not really the flag of the United States, so you don't have to kneel anymore. Problem solved. Not really. A lot of people are very upset about that. Unless the NFL has declared itself a sovereign country into its own right. There's been another one of these ridiculous cases where gays will go into a Christian bakery, order something they know to be offensive to the baker, and then take them to court. And over in Great Britain, this went all the way to Great Britain's Supreme Court. The case lasted 4 years, and it cost British taxpayers about $197,000. And the court ruled that the bakery in Belfast had not acted in a discriminatory manner by refusing to bake a cake with support gay marriage on top of it. Now, I remember when I was a kid, it was sort of an axiom of any retail business. We reserve the right to refuse service to anybody. And I think the LGBTQ community has made a bad mistake. They should have settled for acceptance, because they came on out and said, we're gay, we want you to accept us as we are. And most of us, a couple of holdouts, most of us said, yeah, we accept you, that's fine. Now they've gone further. Now they're trying to basically force into areas where their presence is offending and angering people, and trying to use the courts to bludgeon getting their way. To me, it's just common sense. If you go into a bakery and they don't want to make the cake that you want, find another baker. You know, or just, if the message was support gay marriage, buy a cake. And you can get one of those little squirt can frosting things and put the message on it yourself. But no, let's go to court. Let's make an issue about this. Let's prove our victimhood by wrecking this baker's business. So anyway, the bakery has responded publicly. The general manager, Daniel MacArthur, came on out saying how pleased they were. The Supreme Court emphatically accepted that they did not turn down the order because of the person who made it, but because of the message itself. And he said, family businesses like ours are free to focus on giving all their customers the best service they can without being forced to promote other people's campaigns. And like I said, just get a plain cake. Go to the supermarket, get a squirt can of frosting. They're in the baking aisle. You can put whatever message you want on that cake, and there's no big fuss about it. Now, as you know, we've had a problem in this country with police shootings. And 2 years ago, there was this case where a jury could not reach a verdict in the case of South Carolina police officer Michael Slager, who shot 50-year-old Walter Scott in the back as Scott slowly ran away. And then the police officer picked up his taser and placed it on Scott's body in a blatant effort to corrupt the crime scene. And he got away with it. And he got away with it because he told the jury that he was afraid. He, an armed police officer, was afraid of this 50-year-old man. But apparently the juries have had enough of that, because in August and October of this year, in 2 different cities, 2 different states, 2 different juries have now convicted police officers for murdering young black men in abuses of power, arguably less egregious than Slager's cold-blooded murder of Scott. We have to hold the police to account. All sense of control and restraint seems to be leaving our society. And I know I keep harping on this again, but there was an article that came on out basically showing studies that so many people are on antidepressants, and of course they are, what they don't fully metabolize is going into the water treatment centers. And there are now detectable levels of antidepressants in the water supply. We use a lot of antidepressants in this country. 1 out of every 4 people are on them. Same thing over in Great Britain. And so people are drinking this stuff out of the tap. And we're seeing more and more crazy behavior all over the world. And it's a legitimate question to ask. Are we drugging ourselves insane? Because how else do you explain this bizarre behavior? I think there's an issue there where people just, they're not thinking clearly. They've got poor impulse control. We were talking the other day about this police chief was jerking off in an elevator in front of children, and then he was caught following girls down the beach, jerking off behind them. Does that sound like a rational human being or somebody with poor impulse control. And we know police do a lot of antidepressants. I think there's a serious, serious problem there. I'd like to find a way to validate it. But I remember my one bad experience with antidepressants. Apparently down in Florida, well, I'm going to save this until after the commercial break. We'll be right back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today on this Wednesday. And apparently they had this online prostitution sting in Florida that resulted in 277 arrests for online prostitution and human trafficking. And the people arrested included doctors, pharmacists, law enforcement officers. Now, they called it Operation No Tricks, No Treats. And basically, undercover detectives posted fake ads or profiles online posing as prostitutes. And they just arrested those people. Now, hang on a second. This actually happened a year ago. My apologies on that one. It's an outdated article. I have to be more careful about that. Right now, Patton Oswalt is out there. He's an actor and comedian, and he's on the global warming bandwagon. He said that global warming is a meteor that will strike in our lifetimes. They're really pushing this idea that something must be done within the next 12 years. And it's really a hard sell. And I think the reason they're rushing it is we're going to have another hard winter. It's already hitting early here. Google is in a lot of trouble, and we're probably going to have to talk about most of this tomorrow. But apparently they lied about their project Dragonfly with this China censorship project. And there's been a leaked transcript that revealed a lot of the inner workings of Google, saying that they are, in fact, now very pro-censorship, not just for China, but for here in the United States of America. Now, Google is trying to downplay the project and said it's no big deal here. And according to one Google source, this was total bovine excrement, according to The Intercept, which published the leaked transcript. Now, Google is trying to basically come out and say, well, we're going to be good censors. We have to abandon free speech for safety and civility. And, of course, that's now backflashing on them because of all the censorship that was happening in 2016, the censorship against the Alternative for Germany party in Germany, and all the censorship we're seeing in the run-up to the midterms. Now, an official Google source said the leaked document should be considered internal research and not an official company position. Meanwhile, Google is in other trouble because they hid this user data breach from the public out of concern Congress would take action. This goes back to the Cambridge Analytica scandal. This is coming out of the Wall Street Journal. Now, the incident exposed users' names, email addresses, birthdays, genders, general locations, occupations, relationship status, and photos. And it was caused by a software glitch in Google+, which has now been shut down. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he has lots of interesting things to share with you as well. Take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know, especially this liberal insanity. Please remind everybody that Google, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter are filtering conservative conversations. They're trying to rig the elections once again for the liberals. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.